This is the one main journal article that I had recommended, and it's fairly new. And discusses classical psychedelics and human animal relations. So they looked at two main categories. They looked at a variety of different psychedelic molecules and looked at lifetime use. So people have a steady relationship with psychedelics throughout their life. And then they looked specifically if with ego dissolution and whether those had any changes on three main categories. So speciesism, animal solidarity, and then the desire to help animals. So what they found in summary with both lifetime use and with ego dissolution, there was a decrease in speciesisms, a positive attribute to animal solidarity. Then there was different results on. So people have used psychedelics throughout their life. It seemed a pretty neutral, no real increase or decrease after desire to help animals. But then if there was a specific ego dissolution, if you're kind of getting lost on ego dissolution, I'm going to go into that specifically in one moment to give a definition. But with that ego dissolution event, there was an increased desire to help animals overall. So an ego dissolution is usually with a higher dose of psychedelics, that seemed to have more of a positive effect in terms of overall attachment or how people view animals in general, and an increase in actually putting that into action, desire to help animals. Knowing that this is mostly survey work, so there is a lot of discussion of different bias in here, of maybe people who are prone to taking psychedelics might be more open or have a stronger relationship to nature in general. So good to keep that in mind. So I liked this quote, and we'll talk about speciesism because it does come up in one of the journal articles. So while humans biologically belong to the animal group, human identity is commonly characterized by a cultural separation from animals, largely based on human exceptionalism and prejudice towards animals in favor of the perceived interest of members of one's own species. So this is also referred to as speciesism. Okay, and so some good points of information that I drew from that article, I thought were good discussion points. So when socio-culturally constructed value systems are dismantled, there is the potential for animals, especially non-pet animals, to be re-individualized and not solely viewed as measures for human gains in industrial practices. And then also results suggest that classical psychedelic use and ego dissolution may facilitate a shift in human-animal relations towards less anthropocentric frameworks that acknowledge human-animal environmental interconnectedness. Don't we love those words? And enable more than human solidarity, which may subsequently lead to an increase in pro-environmental and sustainable attitudes and behaviors. So what is this getting at? Especially trying kind of understanding what are psychedelics doing and why may they be causing this increase in relatedness to other species and nature itself. But moving into more of the main things I want to talk about this evening are humans' relationship with everything outside of them. And I do like this term, and it came up in some of the journal articles that I recommended, which is biophilia. And so understanding that humans have an innate need with the natural world, and nature connectedness is a basic human need. So the connections that human beings subconsciously seek with the rest of life. Okay. So whether we're aware of it or not, people theorize that we have this strong need to connect with nature. And as a society, especially with urban societies, we're becoming more and more divided from our natural world. And a lot of people theorize that that is actually contributing to the global mental health epidemic. And so how can we repair some of these connections that we find both with animals and humans, both for the benefit of the planet, hopefully having a greater understanding or not seeing the planet separate from us, and then being more concerned about the current state of climate change, or environmental degradation in general, but also these reciprocal effects, knowing that humans spending time in nature or with animals in positive ways can be very beneficial to their mental health as well. Okay, so ego dissolution, if you're not familiar with that term, so also we call it ego death or ego loss, is a profound psychological experience, often associated with the use of psychedelics, meditation, or other spiritual practices. So essentially, it is characterized by a temporary loss of our ego, leading to a feeling of unity with the universe, others, or a higher power. So this can be not always, but a common experience that people have on high doses of psychedelics where they do not can at that moment have a relationship with who they are as a person, but they are outside of themselves, a oneness or oceanic boundless. Sometimes it's discussed, this feeling of being interconnected or a part of everything. So that experience itself might be what is causing someone to not be so, let's say, self-centered, and part of a higher self or an overall interconnection with everything. Okay, so another way to put that, so seen from another animal's perspective, this could decrease the boundaries between self and animals, which can also lead to a pro-environmental concern. Effect has also been described in astronauts and what they actually call the overview effect. And so they say is a truly transformative experience involving senses of wonder and awe, unity with nature, transcendence, and universal brotherhood. And so this overview effect is what they lay for astronauts who go out and see the whole Earth and have just a different perspective on where they fit into everything. Maybe feeling smaller, but larger as well as interconnected to so much more than themselves. Okay. So moving a little bit more into the nature side of it, there's more research on this nature relatedness. The human animal bond paper that I mentioned is the only one that I am aware of. But in general, there's a couple more discussing their deepened relationship with nature. And that for a lot of people, this can be very positive, very, very exciting, and to see how psychedelics can maybe contribute to, let's say, the openness or advances of human consciousness. And I think part of that would be this increased relationship to nature and not seeing ourselves a part of it. So this is a good paper coming out of Imperial College of London, the Carhart Harris Lab, Egoism to Ecoism, Psychedelics Increased Nature Relatedness, State Mediated and Context Dependent Manner. So a good paper, I recommend looking through it. Again, it discusses some of the biases and how they approach that. But in general, nature relatedness was significantly increased 2 weeks, 4 weeks, and 2 years after the psychedelic experience. That initial nature relatedness that might come might be further extended by people having a better appreciation for nature and then choosing to go into nature more, which is great. And then having those continued positive effects, which can last for years by developing a stronger relationship to nature in general. And then we discuss what are some of the reciprocal benefits. So from our point of view, looking, hopefully having a kinder, compassionate view of nature will be a positive thing for nature, but what are the reciprocal benefits that people have of going into nature as well? So just read this. An increased acknowledgement of nature has also been implicated in enhancing psychological connectedness in a broader sense, including connectedness to other people, nature, and life in general. There is a substantial body of literature linking nature relatedness to psychological health and well-being, including improved well-being at the state and trait level. Specifically, nature relatedness has been found to be associated with lower levels of anxiety, a greater perceived meaning in life, higher vitality, higher psychological functioning, greater happiness, and positive affect. Nature relatedness has also been found to be a strong predictor of pro-environmental awareness, attitudes, and behavior, outperforming all other variables tested as a single construct. And so what I found interesting, and it seemed consistent across papers, even though they were asking for many different psychedelic compounds, it seemed psilocybin consumption was number one in terms of a greater nature relatedness following consumption. See, I guess LSD was number two, but psilocybin consistently ranked number one. So I think that's a pretty interesting thing to understand for us. Given this kind of research, does the setting make a difference? So what I mean by that, remember we talked about set and setting in the first lecture. Set being the mindset that someone enters into a psychedelic experience, and setting being where that is. And that can include the physical environment and also who's around you and everything else. So having a psychedelic trip safely in nature seem to more consistently create a deeper nature relatedness, but not necessary. There's still people who had boundless oceanic experiences being in a therapeutic room with blindfolds and still had that sense of dissolution and connection. But it does seem that nature can play an important part. And where that even comes up more importantly is the preparation and integration, as we talked about. Preparation being everything that leads up to the psychedelic experience, and then integration in that critical period, open state. It can be very positive to be in nature during both those phases. This all sounds great, right? Super positive, wonderful. So we can give everybody psychedelics. They'll all see animals different. They'll see nature different, and that's the solution to everything, right? Not necessarily. So I do want to bring up the concept of psychedelics being what's called a non-specific amplifier, and this is something that Stanislav Graf, famous psychedelic researcher, brought up. And so I'll read this, and then we can talk about it a little bit more. So in the context of psychedelics, the term non-specific amplifier refers to the idea that these substances can amplify or enhance a wide range of mental and emotional states, experiences, and perceptions, rather than producing specific effects that are the same for everyone. This concept was introduced by psychiatrist Stanislav Graf, who suggested that psychedelics do not have a uniform, predictable effect on users. Instead, they intensify whatever mental content is present in their user's mind at the time of use. Okay, so I think this is really important, taking in consideration everything I just presented. And this may not be true for everybody, and the environment that that person's in, the state of mind that that person is in, this could conceivably go the exact opposite way. An example people often use is Charles Manson, who had his cult and they gave LSD, and in a kind of a brainwash cult scenario, they ended up doing very horrific things, which I won't go into. And so it's not necessarily you take this substance and this wonderful thing is going to happen. There's a lot of factors that go into having this kind of positive experience. And so that's important to know of if this is a potential outcome we're looking for, or helping people move towards this, then how do we create that environment to make that possible? Those would be some of the questions, or there's just a lot more that we need to know before we can make these very bold and clear claims. Given this non-specific amplifier, what are some of the potential risks as it relates to human psychedelic use and the human-animal bond? I have some that I think of, which may be positive for that person, but how is that going to show up in the exam room if they see their animal different? Is this going to change the way they want care, how they approach certain disease conditions, certain procedures? And then for sure, for me, death and dying within veterinary medicine, I think people could have a very changed relationship with this as well. And so those are some of the things that come to my mind, but I'm interested to hear what everyone else has to say related to this as well, because I think this is where I get really interested. It's not just about the psychedelic medicines and the potentials in both humans and animals and environmentally, but what are these other conversations that it's going to bring up based on changing consciousness or changing frameworks, and how is that going to change our position or as animal health providers as well? So thank you for listening, and we will jump into the conversation this evening.